All right, welcome to Philly.net. After the show here, I'm Chris Gomez, and we have
Tony Bergoldi.
all right, he's a little taller than I am. We've also got try and even things out. We've also got Rich Ross behind the camera, and we have another guest tonight. We've got him available on camera too. We've got Andy Schwamm, who is a longtime Philly.net member and a board member of the TechBash Foundation. We like talking about TechBash here. A cool conference that is taking place when this year, Andy?
It's in November this year, November 12th to 15th.
Cool. Awesome. At the Kalahari Resort in the Poconos, which is a lot of fun. That place is great.
You gotta love the Kalahari.
Yeah. So we're super excited about that. I imagine that even though that's not till November, that it's probably just like the Rose Parade, right? The planning is all year round.
We start planning the 2019 one, technically even before the 2018 one, certainly before it's finished, because during the event we're already planning the next one, but it takes a while to put it together, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
We're getting better at it, in some ways. We're getting better, I hope.
Well, it's awesome. And I also know that on the TechBash YouTube channel, you have talks from last year's TechBash, so everybody can get an idea of the just awesome quality of speakers and content, because it was just really great. Rich and I were there participating in the streaming last year.
Yeah, that's all thanks to you guys that we have that streamed content, and it's really really pretty good. And if you go to our website, techbash.com, there's a news section now. We actually just redid our website, and it has a news section now, which ironically we didn't have any kind of news like that before. But now that we have news, one of the there's an article there that lists all the different talks that we have up on the YouTube channel. And we've got Scott Hunter's keynote, we've got Jeff Fritz's talk, a couple of, we're looking at it now.
Yeah.
There's one talk by Jeff Fritz, but we've got a whole bunch of stuff. We streamed a lot of the content from like one of the full days there. We got a lot of, maybe 2 days. Did we do 2 days worth of content? I guess so.
Yeah, we did.
Looking at the list, yeah.
We did 2 full days.
Yeah.
And some interviews as well, which is starting to show up there recently.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So tonight here, Philly.net, we talked about Azure DevOps, and specifically, we had a lab on the test plans pillar portion, a hub. There's the different hubs in Azure DevOps, boards, repos. Let's see if I can get them. Boards, repos, pipelines, test plans, artifact. Do I win anything?
No. You get an attaboy.
I get an attaboy. So yeah, we did just a little lab showing how you could set up your own test plans, and it ended up being a manual test plan on that Parts Unlimited site, which has become pretty famous if you do the Azure DevOps Labs. What's really cool about Azure DevOps, if you didn't see the show or you can go watch one of our recordings, is that there's a series of hands-on labs that any of us can use. And there's even a generator that you go to, and it generates a whole Azure DevOps project so that you don't start with nothing. You at least have something that's going, and there's issues, and there's boards, and there's even bugs. And so it's here at, and I think that link is it AzureDevOpsLabs.com? Yeah, Azure DevOps, blah, let me get that right. AzureDevOpsLabs.com. And we've been going through these labs with our attendees, and tonight we did one of the ones that was in that top row. But then if you dive further down, the top ones just kind of get you started with the product, but what's amazing is you go further down and they show you integrations with all kinds of tools from Jenkins to GitHub, Teams, and so on. And so the labs go further than just, okay, here's the product, now figure out the rest. I mean, there's quite a bit of in-depth stuff there. But you were saying, I think, that we were talking about who is using Azure DevOps maybe at work on the job. And I imagine that if you come from the TFS world, or the Visual Studio Team Services world, that might be someone who uses it. And Andy, you're one of those people?
Yeah, happy to say we've been hard to keep the names right these days, but we've been TFS for a while. We didn't use VSTS, we used TFS on premises.
Right.
And really generally happy with that. but it's this is one of these like good problems to have. Why are we not happy with TFS? Because it updates so much. There's always some new stuff coming out, right? And we always have to upgrade our installation. And so
Okay.
moving to the cloud is just such a simpler way to resolve that by always getting the latest and greatest because they drop stuff every couple of weeks.
Right.
I think it's every 3 weeks is their schedule.
I think so, yeah. So we're now in the process of doing a migration, which is somewhat complicated. I've had I don't know if I want to say the pleasure of doing migrations like 3 times now, I think, to previous versions of TFS. It can be challenging if you want to keep your history of source control and uh, there's a lot to it. But now we're in the process of migrating to Azure DevOps, and I'm really excited to get up to that platform and then just not have to worry about migrating again.
Right, right. So in TFS, did you use was your organization a heavy user of the issues and that tracking, which I think now we would call the Azure DevOps boards section? But that was generally like your issue tracking, your sprint tracking.
Yeah, work item tracking is generally what it was referred to. I think that was what it was referred to before.
Yeah, right. And then you get
we use that pretty heavily. We use work item tracking with sprints and all that kind of stuff, boards, and we use source control. We use a combination of source control. We have what do they call it? TFS VC, which is the built-in TFS version control, and we use Git hosted in our TFS instance, and we also use the builds, all the TFS builds. We don't use TFS currently. We weren't using TFS for deployments. We use a tool called Octopus Deploy, and we have that installed on premises as well. But the consensus now is if we're going to go to Azure DevOps and we're going to migrate all that stuff up to the cloud, we're probably going to switch over to, not even probably, I think we're pretty much definitely going to switch over to use the deployment pipelines. And that feature has just come such a long way since when we made the decision to go to Octopus, which again, I think is a great product, but it'll be easier for us to just put it all into one place, I think, now.
Right. Well, I think one of the big selling points of Azure DevOps is that unlike some of the earlier iterations of TFS or VSTS or all the different branding for that, this one has been made to be Lego pieces. If you want to use your favorite product anywhere in here, use it. In fact, I'm not even sure, you could have some repos in Azure DevOps repos and some in GitHub and some somewhere else, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's like composable, I guess you would say, right? Or Lego blocks. Use what you want. And, there's a lot of products out there, and I think they're doing a pretty good job with Azure DevOps. I've always said that I think all those pieces are good, and I don't want to cause any riffles, ruffle anybody's feathers here, but maybe some of those pieces, if you split them all out, the work item tracking and the builds and the source control, you could say maybe some of those aren't best in breed. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Let's not debate whether they are or not. But the integration of those pieces and the ease of which they do go together, if you use them all, it's beautiful. So easy.
Right. And then I guess if you're a heavy Visual Studio user too, you get some nice integration. Maybe even with VS Code
and now
nowadays.
Git is so first class that it's easy that way too.
Yeah, it feels like Git is the default source control now, even for
I feel
everybody.
weird not using Git nowadays, even though I don't fully understand all the commands.
Right. I mean, all the Microsoft major repos are on GitHub.
Yeah.
Or FX and.
When people at my office, they'll say to me, "How come? Why do you think we should switch to Git?" And I could go pros and cons with Git versus TFS source control, but I usually kind of go back to this default answer, like, well, Microsoft itself uses Git, and they probably know something I don't know, or a lot of things I don't know. And if they're doing it, that's a good sign.
Right, right. Well, certainly it's not going anywhere.
Right.
It's the world's source control at this point. I mean, I think you could fairly say GitHub is the world's source control repository.
For, externally facing open source.
Yeah,
I still think some internal stuff is,
Sure.
I can think of every client that I work with is all internal, nothing
On their own
GitHub.
servers.
Yes, but
Okay.
all Git and Azure DevOps and
Yeah.
VSTS. So
Yeah, I think that makes sense. A lot of times you might say we're happy to use the tool, the platform, but we still want it behind a locked
Yep.
door. I'm not sure as we get more and more connected, does it matter?
well,
But it's hard to say. It's hard to say.
yeah.
But so no, that's been good. Now, what do you think? I'm curious now. What are the benefits? Like, how do you get the most out of it? Because I think one of the things that always overwhelms me when I look at, I guess in this case, Azure DevOps boards or any of these tools, is you see the issues. Like, how do you know that you're not being too granular with issues? Can you be too granular with them, or can you be too broad and have too few, too many? It gets overwhelming.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's definitely complicated. You can certainly be too narrow. You can certainly be too broad. I think it's one of those classic answers. It depends.
Sure.
Definitely.
Everybody's favorite answer, and it really depends though on your situation, right? And you have to sort of play with it and figure out what the right space is. I think one of our continual struggles outside of the tools altogether is what is a user story, and that's so outside of the scope of the actual tooling, right? It's a whole different thing altogether. What is a user story? What level of detail should it be? And and I think there's a different answer for each team to some degree. I'm sure there's the textbook definition, but we scope things differently than maybe other teams would. And I think we try to find a system that works pretty well for us. A couple of years ago, we were writing big requirement documents. And what I do know is that wasn't working.
Okay.
It wasn't a total failure. There were circumstances when it worked, but as a general rule, it wasn't working out well for us. And we did switch to more of an agile methodology, and we're using smaller user stories, and we're seeing it as successful. Not always in every, excuse me, not always in every instance, right? There's problems with every methodology, every software, everything has problems. So if you're looking for a perfect kind of see it kind of situation, you're going to be unhappy. But finding the sweet spot that you're asking about, what goes, at what level of granularity. One thing we try to do though, one thing we've learned is to err on the side of less granularity. You can always get more granular. But we used to try to put all these big things in place. Different organizations I've worked at too have done this, where we try to put in all this structure around work items and layers and parents and child and grandchildren, like all this sort of hierarchy. And we find that by not imposing that and letting let it sort of be a little simpler, it's working better for us. We try not to force every team to do it exactly the same way. We have a lot of different work teams, and we try to let them have some say in how they structure their work items. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I know to Andy's point of whether to the point of it depends. We at my current company with what our current client, what we're doing is maybe too granular in that we are actually having a user story just for the front end to say, as a user, I want to be able to do blah, and we kind of describe what the front end looks like. Then we have a user story that says, as the system, I want to be able to save. Another user story, as the system, I want to be able to delete. As the system, I want to be able to edit. And I get why we're doing it, because we're trying to say this is an API backend story where maybe we can pull that into the sprint if we end up needing more work to do. But at the same time, it's very confusing because I work with developers, and a situation came up where there was a story for saving, there was a story for editing, there was a story for deleting. There was no story for loading the data, And the developer actually asked me, so how should we handle this? Should we just build the UI and the other functionality and get a new story for the next sprint to load the data? And I laughed. I was like, no, just put it as a task on the UI story that you need to load the data. Because personally, I think a user story should be, here is a screen, a function, or whatever, and then you break it down by tasks underneath, saying, there's a UI portion, there's a save portion, there's a load portion, there's a delete portion.
So you're thinking the vertical slice of functionality.
Yes.
I'm a user, and I want to do something in a system.
Yeah.
From that top level, I don't care how it gets done.
No.
Just I want to save my account information.
Yeah, or I want to load it or view it.
But then the other flip side point of view, which I have seen, is to say, well, we're looking at it as the API that's being called by the front end is itself a client of these back end stories. So it's like this fictitious person. I'm not really defending it. I'm just saying it's a different point of view.
Yeah.
It's like a fictitious person because today you have a web front end, but your next front end might be mobile, and your next front end might be another system.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily even have to be a human being. So what is a user story?
But I get what you're saying. My concern, though, over it is when you're working with some developers, junior to mid-level developers, they get so narrow focused and they're like, well, this story doesn't exist. I'm not going to code that functionality. And it's like, well, then you didn't deliver what you were supposed to.
Yeah, Tony, I want to play devil's advocate
Go ahead.
there to you, if I could.
Yes, please.
And let me go back and say that it does depend, right? Like, there's not a right answer.
I agree with that.
But where I think your version of things doesn't work out, maybe for a team like mine, is that there's a couple of things. First of all, we try to think of a story as a deployable, testable feature. Right now, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be deployable to production, but I can put it to test, right? So getting the data on the screen is a feature separate from saving or editing or deleting, right? And those can be tested separately, and those can be deployed separately. You also get into when you want to think about something like minimum viable product, something we try to do, especially in our agile world, is that if we can get the product working, and if we can break those stories down, we have a better chance of success because we can prioritize those smaller stories, like just being able to show the data on the screen, and maybe edit the data. And this doesn't work in every scenario, but you can imagine a case where we deploy our app without the delete button, right? Maybe you can edit it, maybe you can display it and edit it, but maybe you can't delete it. And that, of course, is up to every product, different whether you can allow something like that to go to production. But the point is, if you have those smaller stories, you have the ability to do that, right? You also have the ability to sort of focus in on that one task and get it done. And you could say that if there was no story for displaying the data on the screen, which sounds, like your example, right? Which is one of those like, well, you got to have it. Of course we got to have it.
Yeah.
But it was a requirement, or is it not a requirement?
Well,
so if it's a requirement, have a story for it, right?
Sure. Let me clarify what I was saying, because you brought up a good point. I'm not saying a user story includes all the edit and delete and functionality. When in my mind, a user story is I have a screen that needs to display data. That's one user story, and part of that is there's a front end, there's an API call, there's a database changes. Then there's a different story that says, from that view screen, I clicked on a create icon. That's a different user story now, where you have a create screen, you have an API for the save, and you have the database things. So I'm saying, to me, like Chris was saying, it's that vertical slice, but it's not necessarily all the functionality for a CRUD app. It happens to be, here's the display portion, here's the create portion, and each of those there's a different user story. I'm okay with that. I'm somewhat okay with saying, well, let's break out the UI and maybe we can deliver it and it doesn't do anything other than visually you can verify it's laid out correctly, and we have a separate story for an API, because like you're saying, it depends, and I get why we're doing that on this thing. It's just that when the developers become so tunnel focused that they go, oh, there's not a story for loading the data, even though to the acceptance criteria says display data from database, and they say, hey, there's no user story. Can we just deliver it without displaying data? I'm like, no, I just add it as a task and move on.
I feel like part of this is your team, and you mentioned this earlier, Andy, how important it is that you allow your teams to be self-organizing. So does your team decide, and this could even depend on a product, just because you prefer one method, you might go to the next project and say, well, this project is such a set of microservices that are all talking to each other like players on a hockey team that I do want to have a system of user stories and work items that are, well, as this service, I want these things to happen. But then the next project is very screen focused. It's very, I sit here and do work. So in that scenario, I want a user story view where everything I think about is the person at the console, the person at the device. And I guess maybe I wonder, and I'm sort of blazing a trail here, I could be completely wrong, is I wonder if your team wants to know what its view of its universe is. Because if you don't, then you run the risk of writing the two or three or four different types of stories and not having. One thing that seemed really important to you, Andy, is your stories have a definite set of tests. You don't just want to define what happened. You want to know when you're done, and you want that to be objective. Sounds like that's important to you.
Yeah. So let me also say that it's easy for me to say all this, here in this environment and talk about it, and it sounds like we do everything perfectly, or at least, what I'm saying we do perfectly, and we don't. We have problems with it too. We have stories that people will say, oh, this story wasn't as good as that story, or there's too much level and there's not enough level. It's just complicated. It's part of the job that I find sometimes the non-technical parts are like harder to get right than the technical parts a lot of times. But when we get it right, the teams gel pretty well together, and it works. And Chris, like you said, we have different teams. If you took one team's user stories to another team, they would say, like, what are you, crazy? It's either too much or it's too little. It would never be the same. Teams they know how they work well together, and you just have to find that sweet spot.
Yeah. So another thing I'm curious about. Okay, so one thing, so you have a bunch of stories. I guess that means you have a backlog. And in a perfect world, your product, everything that needs to be done to your product is in the backlog. Although I'll even forgive you if you know that, there's a couple things I got to get in there. I'm not trying to say that it's always up to date. But in general terms, what we're hoping is that backlog represents everything we know we need to do. How much effort do you put in to everyone on the team having to understand those stories? Because when I've been on teams where you get together for sprint planning and that meeting is a marathon because you're actually spending more time trying to get everyone up to speed on what we're trying to do instead of that modular focus of, well, you know what you got to do, right? And I know what I got to do, right? Well, let's just go get it done.
Yeah.
I'm not saying either way is right, but those planning marathons are.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
Real quick, if you don't mind, Andy? Let me jump in first. So we've struggled with that because what was happening was, because we're working with a team that's offshore. So they're not in the backlog grooming meetings. They're not in storytelling. They're not in any of that. So we would get to the pointing session. The first pointing session was 3 days long, it felt like, because they started asking all these questions. So the other lead developer and myself ended up initially having one meeting on like the Friday before pointing, saying, these are the stories. What questions do you have? And pointing was on Monday or Tuesday. I forget what day it was the following week. Now it went to two meetings because our backlog and next sprint started growing.
Yeah.
Now it's 3 meetings a week.
Mercy.
And it's the
and pretty soon it consumes everything.
And pretty soon, but it's like an hour a day. We had to figure out how to get the developers not to overwhelm pointing with A, design. They started getting into design, or B, all these like requirement clarifications of, well, what about this and what about this? And it's still a struggle because they still sometimes get into requirement details of, well, what color should the snack bar be? And I'm like, dude, that has nothing to do with
Yeah,
pointing. Let's move
right.
on. I don't know if you've had a similar experience with that, Andy.
Yeah, I think everyone has these. I think that we all struggle with points and estimation, and we have very hard. It's very hard to get used to the fact that a story should have just enough information to get started, and then you can ask questions along the way. That's kind of a hard concept to get used to if that's the way you want to go with it. The other thing is, analysis paralysis, where we're so worried that we're going to put an estimate on the board and we're going to say, if you use points, story points, or if you use hours, whatever it is, it's six, and you think, you're going to be held to the fire for that,
Yeah.
and that's just there's so many factors into why those meetings can be painful.
They're expensive
I
meetings
think
too. It's the whole team.
Oh yes, very
What's
expensive.
that?
They're expensive meetings too, and that
Yeah.
that gets to be. I'm not trying to say the good old days, but when you think about a team lead might have just walked around everyone's desk and said, "Hey, Tony, you work on this part," and "Hey, Andy, you work on this part." No meeting required. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean we built better software. I mean, certainly the reason we're coming up with these systems is because we want to build better software.
Yeah, it stinks. It really it's not. This stuff's hard. That's the first thing, is admit that it's hard. And another thing is, you want to set up an environment of, let's say it's like a comfortable environment where people have confidence in the fact that they can be successful and that they can fail, and fail in small ways, right? So if we don't have the exact measurement on something, we will learn and we will get better at it. But if there's this constant fear of, like, oh, if I get this wrong, I'm going to be in trouble, that's a problem, right? And I think that's maybe sometimes, but that's what starts off the process bad way right off the bat.
Right, right. I mean, I just remember that I've seen this happen a couple times now, where you have that, your team gets together, you organize, you're going to be agile-ish. I mean, we all have different definitions of what that might mean. You have that first sprint planning meeting, and you're even a little excited, and then they turn into marathons, and so you adjust. Well, hold on, maybe I'll work a little bit harder on the backlog, and you're kind of shifting back towards the single person deciding what everyone does model.
Yeah, maybe
And
a little bit.
then you say, well, no, this isn't working either, and it's just so hard to build software, especially as you add people. Which, I feel like there was a whole book about that. So,
Well, I kind of the challenge that I'm seeing on this project, and I'm not saying we go back to waterfall, but there is a benefit because we have a UX designer, and he's working closely with the client to understand what their current system is and where they want to head. Like, we want to capture this, we want to capture that, and he's designing these screens. And he's had a challenge, and he's talked to me about it. Is, Tony, I like agile, but agile is killing me, because what's happening is he's doing a UI screen, and the business analyst is coming in and laying out what the different buttons should do and creating the different stories. But then the next sprint, or during the sprint we're developing it, he finds out some information from the client that he didn't know, because the client is all of a sudden like, we forgot to tell you this, or we needed to do this also. So now all of a sudden the agile methodology says, well, we'll just fix it next sprint. Not yeah, but now he's redesigning the screen completely. So is that really fixing it or improving it, or is it really rewriting the whole thing? And I've seen a screen on the current project I have get rewritten, and to me that's a little frustrating, because I actually would rather see a little bit of effort, especially when it's a greenfield application. A little bit of effort if there's a UX designer and a UI designer, and they're laying out a screen up front saying, let's get the flow of the screens, let's get everything correct, and then let's make sure the client gives a thumbs up and they didn't forget things. I mean, if there's small things along the way, fine, but I don't want to be rewriting the system every sprint, is what
yeah, I mean,
feel like.
the feedback loop is supposed to be that we've delivered a product that works.
Yes.
And then that allows the stakeholder, the customer, the person who really cares, to look at that, and even if it's what they signed off on, to look at that and say like, oh gosh, that isn't going to work at all. We're, and you can even be sorry about it. Like,
Yeah.
so what do you think will really work, or what do we think will really work, goes on the backlog.
Yes.
But where it breaks down in your case is it sounds like you're heading towards a sprint A goal.
We are.
And then in the middle of sprint A, you discover that even now, we're not even done with sprint A. We haven't showed it to the client, and they already know it's not what they want.
Yes.
But we're still going to finish anyway.
Yes.
So that's a little broken.
That's
because you've already discovered that nobody wants it. It's not like you got to sprint A, showed it, and they went, "Oh, wow, that didn't really turn out the way we thought," which is acceptable.
Acceptable,
that,
yes.
We could all understand.
Yeah. Now, this is new information comes up mid-sprint, and they're like, "Hey, well, we'll look at it. Yeah, that did what we liked, but
we were already thinking.
Yeah, we were already.
It's like, well,
we've already got this other.
So I could have gone for pizza on Thursday and Friday.
Pretty much. Hey, can I just play video games?
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, some of these big issues, time and again, when people talk about Agile, it's these same things. Is how long should we do planning? How do you do story pointing? How do you decide it's too long? Do story points mean hours? And the funny thing about it is it's supposed to be self-organizing team, right? What works for your team. But that means you got to have a team that's willing to self-organize, which is not necessarily an easy thing either.
Yeah, it's all hard.
How do you have teams, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot or out your place. Do you have teams that you think like, hey, I wish these folks would maybe commit a little bit more to what a point means to them or what a story means to them? And these folks over here, they're clicking. Like this, they're doing great. They really, Agile seems to work for them. And then it's like, gosh, I don't know. And I don't know as a manager, how do we help people and teams achieve more?
So there's a couple questions.
Yeah.
First off, I want to say that everyone in my organization works perfectly.
Of course.
I
agree.
Right?
This is theoretical. This is purely
right
theoretical.
Of course, not everyone's perfect, and some teams do it better than others. I think the teams that do it that are struggling know, right? And it's been a process. People have grown and gotten better at the way. The answer to your second part, or the last thing you asked, is really the key to the whole thing, right? And this is something that's coming to me more and more as getting. I've had several promotions over the years, and I get to a higher level of responsibility for various teams. And what really is becoming clear to me is that in our industry we have a general. I've been part of the. I'm not claiming anything special here, but the problem is that we promote developers. Hey, that's me. We promote developers to managers. I'm a manager. I've been different levels of responsibility, but using the term manager to say that how people that report to me, and have to treat that part of our job seriously. We have to help. We have to not have as many deliverables if we're going to be managing, and spend time managing and help mentoring and tutoring people and sitting in with their planning meetings, helping them do that, right? And it's hard. It's important, and a lot of companies don't get that right because they promote. Yeah, and I'm waving my hand here from people like me. I'm a developer, right? Hey, you're a manager, and I think I'm a pretty decent. But that's not the point. We get put in these positions, and then at the same time they say, "Well, we want you to manage, but you don't have any time to manage. You have to get the same amount of work done." My company, I think, puts me in a pretty good position. I'm certainly not complaining. They put me in a pretty good position where I have time to do those parts of the job. But if the company's not going to that's the problem, right? And it's really easy to not do. And many managers aren't pushing back against their managers, on the hierarchy there, because they don't want to do it in the first place because they're developers. They're not managers, right? And I'm not talking about everybody, and I'm not trying to, cast any kind of, negative vibes on on us, because I'm us, I'm part of it. But I don't know, do you guys feel the same way that like that job of manager is kind of gone away, and um, we have managers that don't have time to manage. You know what I mean?
I feel like what happens is you either have a great developer who becomes a manager, and you actually lose a pretty good developer because they're busy managing and doing what they have to do, writing reviews and being in meetings about strategy and or whatever happens at that level. I have no idea. But or
I'm in a lot of meetings about strategy.
or you're still knee deep in the code, right? But that doesn't give you time to be a mentor, or maybe you don't make the time correctly. And there's a difference between being a manager and a mentor. A manager is more of what the company needs to get done, and the mentor is more of what your developers need to learn, to be taught, to be helped with. All of those things.
I think a good mentor. It's an interesting topic. Something I've been really focused on a lot lately. I've tried to read up more about mentoring and sort of that aspect of the job. And I found, especially in the agile world, that it's the mentoring part more important. Again, I'm contradicting what you just said. I get your point. I think I know what you mean. But the team management, they don't need me to come in and manage. What they need me to do is mentor them, to shape and help them get to the right decisions and learn from their past, give them the space to try things and the comfort level that they might not succeed at everything, and remind them that mentoring part. We're just reminding them like, sit down in one of our one-on-ones. Let's talk about this agile. This is something we actually spend time on in our meetings. In my one-on-ones with some of my direct reports is things like sprint planning and what's going well with your sprint. Not just like, hey, how's your code, but how's the sprint? How's the team gelling? How are what kind of problems are you have? Right? And sometimes people just want to vent anyway, right? And sometimes we have real problems and we want to do it. We want to get into them, and we try to help. I don't always have the answer, but I think I want people to feel that if we talk through it, we're going to make some progress. And that whole managing mentoring is complicated, and not everybody, not everybody's great at it. I've been really trying to make it. It's like I said, it's kind of interesting you brought up. That's been, I think, the past say 6 months, maybe close to a year, in different ways. I've been trying to focus on that part of my, and I feel like it's been helpful. I mean, the feedback I'm starting to get, I think, if it's accurate from my direct reports, they appreciate that I'm sort of shifting my focus. But I'm also in a role now where I have less responsibility to produce specific, right? Because I don't know if I like to admit it. I mean, my title's not management anymore, but I'm like more managing than I am writing code.
Okay. Yeah. It happens to the best of us, Andy.
Well, I mean, Andy, I agree with you because so I've worn the manager hat also at one point, and I gave that up, and I went back into architecture and then into development. The one challenge that to Andy's point of trying to balance things, I think some companies look at when they say, okay, I'm going to promote, Andy, Tony, Chris, Rich, whoever, Mr. Developer, Mrs. Developer, up to a manager position. They've seen that person rise from, oh, they're a good senior, or they're a good junior developer, they're a good mid developer, they're a good senior developer. Hey, they're leading a team, or maybe they have the lead title, or maybe they don't. But when they get the manager, all of a sudden, a lot of companies go, well, we're going to give you the title. You've been great helping that team out and leading that team. We're going to give you direct reports. So in addition to all your current responsibilities as a lead developer, you're also going to take on managing these people and actually doing their reviews and all the manager type things. But I think it depends on the company. Like smaller companies, I think want you to lead and manage and do all these things and juggle all this stuff. I was lucky when I was a manager. My focus, like you were saying, Andy, one of the things I really wanted to do wasn't necessarily to get in there day to day with them and code and say, what's this, what's that. Now, granted, I told them, hey, if you got a problem, and you can't figure it out and you have a couple ideas, come to me, talk to me, and let's talk it through. Because, I'm a developer, I'm a technical guy just like you. But at the same time, during my one on ones was more about, how are things going? What do you feel about the company? How is your project? Where do you want to go? I didn't talk anything about their code. It was more, how can I help you get to the next step? What are you more passionate about? Do you like what you're doing now? Do you see something else in the company you like? Because I didn't want anybody to be pigeonholed, and I didn't want somebody just to do something every day and not like it. So I think in my mind, I've always associated being a manager with trying to mentor and guide and help them find where their passion is. As a lead developer, though, it's more about saying, okay, we're a team. You're gonna do this. You're gonna do this. We have technical things. I'm going to be over here working on this. So we're all working as a team. But I think at one point you even said it, Chris. Joe might have come around and said, Chris, you're going to work on this. Tony, you're going to work on this. There was no, I mean, it was agile, quote unquote, but it was really being assigned something. And I think it's a mixture of things. So it's just a challenge in I think with companies. I mean, we've all been working about 20 years, so we've seen the different transitions industry has gone through. I mean, the first company I worked at, we didn't call it agile, but basically we delivered features, like you were saying, give a feature to a client and get feedback.
Okay.
We would lay out, we had this waterfall document, but we would lay it out and say, hey, we're going to start working on this. In 3 days, we estimated this would be done. We'll give it to you, and we'll start working on this other thing. And they would look at it and play around with it and then give us feedback. And, we might have to fix something, but we were doing agile before it was agile.
Sure.
It was just...
Yeah, you just realized that it was working to get feedback.
Yeah. You didn't deliver everything at once. You just said, hey, you got these 10 features. Here's your first one while we work on the second one. Here's the second one. We'll fix some bugs in the first one and work on the third one. So, anyway, I kind of touched on a couple
I didn't
topics.
have that in an early place. There's where we actually wrote a requirements document and a design document and
stuck to it.
And the first, well, no,
okay.
we stuck to it for a while, and then what happens is you start to build the thing and you realize that some things aren't going to work.
Yep.
Or maybe there's some better ideas, and so then none of that ever made it into the documents. And to be honest, the first time the customer saw it was when it was unveiled, which is scary as heck. And I don't mean just
when
unveiled,
every feature was done.
And I don't just mean unveiled like, hey, customer. I mean to the general public, because this was at Disneyland, okay? So that's when... I
don't know why the test track keeps stopping at 60 miles an hour.
That was the first time that the customer saw it, too, and so that was a little scary. But
ask me how I know that it would stop at 60 miles an hour.
Yeah. 3 times! But that was some fun stuff. So, both of you mentioned one-on-ones, and that got me thinking a lot about... I have a one-on-one with my manager. That's a pretty popular thing now, I think, have a reasonable length of time meeting every so often with your manager instead of just not hearing from them, except maybe at review time with your review score. So, do you have any advice for what? This is tough because I know everybody here, we all have our real jobs, and we know this is being recorded and all that, but... Do you have any advice?
So I give career talks at Philly.night.
Do you have any advice for what you wish? If I could make a wish list for what I wish my reports would bring up to me at the one-on-one and not keep to themselves, or maybe not be afraid to say, I'm not trying to pigeonhole it. Like, do you struggle getting out of them? Do you ever walk away from it saying like, boy, I'm not sure if we got to it to somewhere this week? But you could also be very casual about it and say like, hey, if it was important, we'd talk about it next time.
Well, Andy, if I can go first, since you're now a manager and I was previously one, so your experience may be newer. I'll just go based on what I would always do. Was so I would have a monthly, and I currently have one monthly with my consulting manager. Uh, and because I was a manager, I freely share with my manager now because I
You think
get
it's
that,
easier?
yeah, it's easier.
Okay.
But in those meetings where I was a manager trying to get information out of it, it really depends on the person.
Sure,
Like
of
some
course.
people were more than willing to dump on me everything, which was fine. Like Andy was saying, it's sometimes a good venting session is what they need.
Yeah.
Other times it was trying to get that person to pull it out and say, what is the challenge that you're facing? Not necessarily technical, just in the company. Are you? I saw you and so were avoiding each other. Do you want to talk about it? So as for me, I had 9 reports. I had to actually kind of pay attention not just to the people that I had reporting to me, but the people that they interacted with. So I was it was almost like a teacher type role
Sure.
where you watch the
On the playground.
classroom
Yeah.
or the playground
Yeah.
and you just see what was going on. I mean, Andy, is that what you experience now? Is that still how you would handle it?
Well, I think everyone does in their one-on-ones, and so I have a few direct reports. Only now one of them do I actually work. That makes right. My other direct reports they're on agile. We have these different teams,
Yeah.
and one of my direct reports I actually sort of pretty much day to day with. So that person I know what's on. The others not really in touch with day to day work. To be perfectly honest, I mean I get reports on some of this stuff, but I kind of rely on the pod, what we call the pod, agile team. We kind of rely on the agile team to know and elevate if there's like a problem. But sometimes they bring problems. What I try to do is that Tony, you actually nailed it earlier. I was really psyched for you to say that you in your one-on-ones you talk about what people want, where they want to go, are they doing the parts of the job they really like? That's that that's it. You nailed it. Like that is the mentor part right there, and
Yeah.
you're kind of inspiring them a little bit, same time by telling them that and understanding what they want to do, and then our job is to help them do that. So that's what I've been focusing a lot on my one-on-ones on is those kind of things where I'll say to them, what are your right? How are things going? Are you doing the kind of things you want to do? And what can we do to change that? How can we put you in a position where you're doing slightly different, different tasks, different responsibility, or different work? I've actually recently started uh, preparing for my one-on-one. I know that sounds like crazy, like preparing.
Why
you're
would you
supposed to
do
prepare
that?
for everything you do. I actually prepare for my one-on-one, and so I've researched a whole bunch of questions out there on the internet that I feel will help me draw out the right response to people and get to the root of it, maybe in a way that I wouldn't have thought to do so in the past. And I find that's helpful. So I'll share one of the questions I was recently asked. My team was, tell me something that one of your previous managers did that you think I could do to improve my role, right? And
That's a good
I've started
question.
to ask that question. I think that there's sort of like different groups of questions. I want in these one-on-ones this opportunity for me to help them, for me to help my direct reports achieve their goal. It's also for them to help me achieve my goal, right? And then of course together there's we're working together to achieve our goal. So I like to know how I'm doing. Well, um, as I said, I've been trying to focus on this sort of manager mentoring aspect of my job, and not always easy to know if you're doing a good job. And I add to that our own different styles and our own different ways, and you might have noticed like I'm a talker, right? I can just keep going on these, right? Did you know that? And so sometimes I want to like keep talking about trying to learn when my employees, I get that look in their eye and they're like, I think we've talked about this enough. I'm like, yeah, okay, we'll move on to a new topic. But there's so many things to talk about on one-on-one, and it's a great opportunity to connect with the team. And one of the best things you can do, they say that there's a study that a lot of managers, I was really surprised, but a lot of managers don't really know things about their direct reports. Do you know what their hobbies, know how old their kids are, and things like that. And probably for us, that's second nature. But I guess for some people it's not. That's a good place to start too. Is like connect, connect a little bit, and share a little in both directions. Try to get that bond going, and then you build that trust. Trust is going to lead them to tell you how things are going when they're not going great, if they feel comfortable with you on those things. You want to know when things aren't going great. You want to solve that problem. You let somebody to just walk out, or ready to walk out. Say, well, this problem's here. A year. we sit together twice a month, or Tony, what did you say, once a month?
Yeah, I said once a month for me.
Now
yeah.
I didn't even know about. So we have to know about it. But so I've been enjoying the one-on-one.
Well, you brought up a really good point about the trust, building the trust. My manager, similar to what you're talking about, I barely work day to day with my consulting manager. He's in Mississippi. In fact, I'm up here in Philadelphia. We're on completely different projects, and but I talk to him once a month. And one of the things he drives home that I think I kind of did when I was a manager, inadvertently, I guess you could kind of say, because I am a talker, I am a listener though. When I ask a question, I really try to focus on what they're saying so I remember it. And sometimes I'll take notes because I have trouble, like you're saying, remembering kids' names or how old they are. So I would, like after one-on-ones, I would write down Adele has a son who's 30, just because sometimes those details would escape me, so this way next time I could ask him. But the point was my consulting manager, who doesn't see me very often, he remembers, oh, Tony has two kids. They're in scouts. One's in karate. And he does this with a lot of people. And one of the things when I talk to him about, hey, I'm working with so and so on this project, he immediately goes to LinkedIn and he looks up the person and he goes, oh, well, that person is this and they've done this and they're connected to this person. Did you know that? And like he'll just really dig in and learn about these people. Even he's like, you got to know the people you're working with. He stresses that so much to me that I've gotten to the point where like I'm on a client thing and it feels weird, but I go on LinkedIn and I look them up and I'm like, and my profile, I have it that I can see who's looked at me, so that means they can see that I looked at them. I'll show up in their history, and I've seen where I've looked at people, that my clients, and a few days later I'll see that they've looked at me. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay.
LinkedIn stalking is real, right?
Yes, it is. But he taught me that, but to your point, it's about that trust that I did learn and knew that no one was going to share with me if they didn't believe I cared. Or it's like that old saying, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's the trust. If they don't think if they don't feel trust enough that you know them and believe in them and want to hear about them, they're going to be like, I'll just tell Tony what he wants to hear. And
well, right. That's exactly
Tony,
it. Is not hearing what you want to hear.
Go ahead.
I never heard that quote.
Yeah, that was
wait.
that
You
was good.
okay?
That was new to me too.
Really, no one knows how much you care. And wait, no one cares. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
So, you really, I heard that like 20 years ago.
I hadn't heard that either, but I'm not.
Okay.
I mean, maybe, right? It's just not something that was
off the top. Yeah,
right.
Somebody.
And I thought, oh, pretty good. Yeah. That's pretty good.
A couple people had said it to me like 20 years ago. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Interesting.
So, like I can share all this knowledge with somebody about, like mentoring and helping them at the company. and factual and this and that, and they're just gonna sit across the table and go, "Okay, Tony, sure." Because why are you telling me this? I don't care what you know because you don't care about me. You're not listening. So I can talk too, as you can tell.
No, it's okay.
This is why I like throwing it back, but any there's always talk about these kind of topics, or not so many of them. You often find talk on like sort of soft skills about starting to see more and more talks conferences about managing, mentoring, working with your team, and it's really worth if you're a developer or a lead or a manager and you're at an event, it's really worth stepping away from technical stuff for a while to focus on this part of the job because it's sort of like an underserved part of what we do.
Right.
It's important.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that you're saying that at Philly.night, I've been giving a talk at least once a year on career advice from the trenches, and some of the stuff that we're covering here is kind of what I also cover in that talk because, like you're saying, we get so as developers, we get so focused on I got to learn the latest technical stuff, but you don't know how to interact with people. You don't know you just you have no ability to talk to somebody or to listen to somebody, which is more important than even talking sometimes.
Yeah. So I mean, the tie back to Azure DevOps was that we have this. Really, the reason what made me think about it was that is we started there talking about boards, and I thought, well, here's this technology to help our team, but if we don't have the skills as people, then so what? So we put a bunch of work items on a board. That's not what's going to get it done. So I really wanted to hear today a lot of both of your perspectives, especially because I know Andy's been passionate about a long time about being a better mentor and manager. We've talked about it before, even in a forum like this or on the old Static Void podcast, stuff like that. So, but I believe that we're going to lose Andy in a minute here. Got another engagement, right?
TechBash planning meeting, actually.
Yeah. And then I think we might have a couple wrap-up items. But other than that, I really do want to thank you for being on today. And I like these kind of topics with you. That's why I knew when you were going to be here, I said, oh, man, we can talk about how you get the most out of people and your team and being productive as developers.
Hey, and we finally got Rich on the screen.
Yeah, look at that.
Rich back here pushing all the buttons.
Cool. I appreciate you guys having me on. I want to say that tonight is one of the times I really got to take advantage of live stream from the meeting earlier because, like a lot of people, I got a lot of stuff going on. I would love to have been and been there in person with you guys, and I'm like, it's the live stream.
Yes.
I'm gonna watch. It ended up being Rob. I thought it was Rob and Chris, but it was watch Rob talk about Azure DevOps, and in this case was testing and that stuff. But the stream is so great because I think you're better off being there in person. I don't think there's any question about that in my mind. But
there's food.
I had a great experience watching it on. I could hear it well. The video was good. And then I'm like, hey, now I get to participate in the end with you guys. And it's always fun to talk with you guys. If you'll let me, come on. I'm always happy to talk about different topics. And I appreciate what you guys are doing and taking your extra time on these evenings and trying to extend it. And this goes so far towards building. This is what we're trying to do. It's not just about content community. I think that this show goes far to that.
Yeah. So make sure that your communities, including TechBash, know that Philly.net's streaming because we got to get the word out. That's the trick, right? You can have great content, but we got to let people know it's happening, and then also watching the recording on YouTube is great, and I encourage everyone does that. And if you're doing that now, that's awesome. But to Andy's point, if you're there live, you can ask questions, and we will get them to the presenter. Which there's no opportunity like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for coming on, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Andy.
Oh, thank you guys.
Awesome perspectives.
Yeah, we'll switch to these guys.
Yeah, so I
don't worry, Rich will hang up on you.
I don't know that we have a whole lot to wrap up on, but I was kind of thinking about coming up in the user group time frame. at the end of the Philly.net meeting, we were trying to say like, hey, what's happening? Obviously, there's going to be a presentation meeting in 2 weeks from tonight.
Yes.
And that is going to be on career.
That will be on Career Advice. Apex Systems is going to be talking to us. They have a couple of their internal folks that they're going to get together. Apex Systems is a recruiting firm, so they're getting a couple of their folks together to talk to us about that. And then they're actually reaching out to clients, and they're going to have like a panel discussion, of what their hiring managers at their clients kind of look for, from a high level. I think that's what we're targeting. And then, so that's on March 20th, and that will obviously be in person and on Mixer and YouTube and Twitch, live and obviously rebroadcast. And then in 2 weeks after that or so, we're going to have our hands-on lab.
Yep, April 3rd.
April 3rd, yep.
Our next set of hands-on labs, we're getting into, Visual Studio 2019 comes out on April 2nd. Yep. .NET Core 3, I'm not 100% sure if it's released that date. I don't know. But the previews are out. Yeah. So at the very least, we will be able to start taking a look at .NET Core 3. And while I'm not 100% sure what the agenda is, for my money, what's new in .NET Core 3 is desktop support on Windows for the first time, WinForms and WPF. Yeah. And I think Razor components are in that package, which is also known as server-side Blazor. So if that means anything to you, then that's coming, right? And if it's already March 21st or April 4th, then check out the YouTube channel, because that means it's already happened. Yep. And you'll want to see the recordings of that awesome content there.
Well, and I would say if you're going to come to the lab or watch the lab, if you can get Visual Studio 2019 installed as soon as it's released on the second, yep. Although there might be a preview out there now. So
preview's been out for a while.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought.
So you can get a preview now.
So get the preview, get the one that's released on April 2nd, so that you're prepared for the lab if you're going to participate in the lab.
There's also we didn't talk about it at the meeting tonight, but there is an Azure Developer Days, April 19th, I want to say it is. I might be wrong about the date.
I got to check that. I thought there was two, but
yeah. Well, let's put it this way. I've signed up for it. And the crazy thing about it is it can be hard to find, right? Like if you went Googling around, which is crazy. It should be easier.
Bing, right? No.
It should be easier to search for.
Right.
And I actually, the way I know about it is somebody tweeted, someone I don't even know tweeted, hey, there's a ton of free Azure developer camps coming up. So I clicked on the link. There was the list. Malvern's on the list, and according to it, it said it was going to be hands-on with pieces of Azure, including containers. Which nice. I recently went to an Azure day here in Malvern, which I thought it was great, and it was more of a presentation. It was technical. Yeah. It was technical. It wasn't marketing, but it was more of presentation focused of like, hey, here's what you can do with Azure serverless, with functions, with containers, with Kubernetes. But it didn't go like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, like open up your laptop.
And the blurb for this one was like, we're going to do it. So I'm coming. I'll be here.
Okay.
or
So
may not
I signed up for it. And actually, so signing up for it is how I have like an email where I can go and get to that link. It's unfortunate. We'll have to figure out how to promote that a little bit better. I wish I could have told the membership tonight.
Because I went looking for it, trying to do the same thing. And all I kept finding was the one that we did in the fall, the one you went through before. So that's one of the things you want to. I got to find that for the meeting on the 20th, where we share that out.
Yeah, definitely if it's in April. And then I want to mention that in August, April 12th and 13th, we have our Philly Code Camp. Yeah. It will be the 26th Code Camp, I believe.
No, it's at least the 20.
Maybe it's 27th. Huh?
Maybe 27th or 28th. I don't know. Well, here's the deal. I know
it wasn't
that on a few camps in a row were the 25th in the emails because I think Bill forgot to change it. So
that
I
is
think
true.
We had like a 25th and a 25th, and we might have even
had
a
25.3.
But I'm not sure. I'm to be honest, I'm not 100% sure.
I think it's the 27th. It's either the 26th or the 27th. Rich might be right. It might be the 27th. In any event, we've had a lot of these going. We have a successful record of doing these. And for Geez, we've been doing Friday sessions for
Couple
4 years now,
Yeah.
4 or
Good
5
3 or 4
years,
years.
something like that. And we're doing them again. We have, I think, 6 or 7 sessions right now, all day sessions you can sign up for. They go on sale. I think it's next Friday for the Friday sessions. And so if you're listening to this, and hopefully it's in the next week, be prepared for that because it does sell out. And then on Saturday we have our normal code camp with different offerings, about 50 to 70 different topics. Uh, Rich might be doing one. Chris might be doing one. I'm doing one. I'm just gonna sucker him in as we talk about it.
Not a Friday one, but maybe we're trying to do a Saturday one, so at least like an hour.
Saturday.
The typical 35-minute session there. But regardless of whether we're going to do sessions or not, we're certainly going to live stream that content just like we did the past 2 code camps. And that you can, if you look at the YouTube numbers and the trends of those things, those events have continually helped to increase the viewership.
Yeah.
That's why we definitely want to keep doing them. So we'll do, if we can find someone who's interested in presenting their content Friday, as Chris did the last time in November, then we'll go ahead and do a full day session on the Friday course, the workshop. If not, we'll do one of the rooms and then have all kinds of interesting guests and speakers to talk about some of the things that they're doing in between all the sessions and over the lunch break.
Yeah.
So we got that coming up. So
yeah. Well, I think that just about does it for early March, heading into getting closer to Code Camp.
So 2 other things. There is a session that I don't have the link to you. I tried to get it before we came in here, but there's a couple of things. So there's a DigiGirls.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think you guys mentioned it at the main meeting.
We
Okay.
did.
So we'll make sure we have the link in the show notes on that. But that is something that is great for young girls, middle school, high school age, to come out, learn about coding, to learn about, we're doing 3D type activities. And they're also, we're really lucky that one of the local robotic clubs is going to come out and bring their students who are currently on their way to, I believe, the World Championship for the robots and the current set of challenges that they're going through. So
Nice.
One of the local students. So a lot of great content there, as well as some really good speakers too. The DigiGirls is one, which is Code Camp, and there's Azure Boot Camp coming up to the
Global Azure
27th.
Boot Camp, right?
Yeah. So this is the round the world, everybody
Oh,
about
yep.
Azure in one day. Hundreds of sites around the world with thousands of people all up attending those. So some great content out of that too. So if you're interested in that, Global Azure Boot Camp, I believe is the URL, is where you can go and see our site here in Malvern and go ahead and do the registration. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, awesome. Tony, Rich, it was great talking to you tonight.
Always a
Great.
pleasure,
Yeah.
gentlemen.
And
Definitely.
we'll see everybody in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Cool.
All
Enjoy.
right.
See you guys.
Have a good night.
Oh, that's Andy.
So
Oh, that was the wrong
we're
button.
we're now Andy. Yeah.
Sorry,
all of
let's try
us.
this button.